Hey there everyone, my name is Vilas. You're watching Selenium Express, and in this video, we're going to be talking about one of the very important Spring Boot REST API interview question. It's all about content negotiation today. And what do we mean by content negotiation? How can we implement it? What are the benefits? These are the concepts that you mostly need as a Spring Boot REST API or a Spring Boot microservices developer. And also for your day-to-day job and for your interview perspective also, this is a very important topic that we should be aware of. Okay, so content negotiation, huh? I think you already know about this. Have you ever done salary negotiation with your HR? Let's say you are switching your job and your HR said that they will give you 20 lakhs per annum and you are like, no, I want 22 lakhs. Then the HR said, okay, done. We're going to be giving you 22 lakhs. Well, I have given you a very simple scenario. It is not that easy all the time, but this is how we do salary negotiation. Just like that, imagine an example. I am a content creator and I produce contents. And let's say you guys are my content consumer. You are consuming my contents. But let's say, one of you basically asked me that, Avilas, you always produce video contents. I do not need your video content. I want your concept in audio format, right? Let's say somebody as a consumer or you as a subscriber asked me this, that, hey, I want your content, but not in video format. I want your content in audio format. Then you as a consumer is negotiating with me. I am a producer, right? Who is producing the content. You are a consumer who is consuming my content. But here, while consuming the contents, you are negotiating with me that I want your content in audio format or I want your content in video format. You understand the content negotiation? That's what exactly happens when it comes to the Spring Boot REST API. We're writing endpoints, applications, the Spring Boot applications. And what our Spring Boot application is basically doing? We have some data in our database. We are exposing those data through the endpoints. And we are making our endpoints public so that somebody can hit our endpoint and can grab the data. But while grabbing the data, the consumer applications who are consuming our data, they can demand our data in different format. Let's say that application is asking us data in JSON format. Maybe that particular application may ask us the data, hey, I want your data, but in XML format. Hey, I want your data, but I want it in PDF format. So the consumer or the client application can ask us data in different format. So the client application is basically going to negotiate with your Spring Boot application, the application that we are writing, right? We have application, we are writing those applications. So we are the data producer. We are writing the Spring Boot REST API endpoints, are endpoints that are generating some data and exposing it to the outer world. But let's say there is a client who is consuming our data. That client can ask us data in different format. It wants the data, but it wants data in X format, okay? So the client can negotiate with our server. But we, as a Spring Boot developer, Spring Boot REST API developer, the endpoints that we're writing, do we really need to think about the client all the time? Let's say the client is asking us the data in JSON format, or the client is asking us the data in XML format, or in plain text, or in PDF, or in form of image. So are we bound to respect the client here? That's what that we'll be finding out in this particular video. And exactly we will understand how we can write Spring Boot application, which can produce us the data in different format. What are the thumb rules? What are the best practices? And we're going to be exploring all these things in this particular video. Long introduction, but I think this helps. My name is Vilas. You are watching Selenium Express. Let's just get started. Why to wait for? And hey, to subscribe, to like, and I'm keep saying you all these things since 2015. Right now it is 2025. Come on, man. Keep subscribing. It's been a long time. Let's just get started right now. All right, so now let's just start creating a Spring Boot project here. I don't have IntelliJ today, so I have opened up my IDE. This is STS I'm using. You guys use whatever you would like to, VS Code or IntelliJ. So I'm gonna create a project right now. So I'm gonna say create a new Spring starter project, or just do a right click and look for the Spring starter project. Okay. And I'm gonna name it right now with, let's say, Spring REST Content Negotiation. And select the type is Maven, the packaging will be jar, language will be Java. Version, you use anything which is greater than 17, that should be fine. Let's just click on next. So I will be using the Spring Wave here because I want to create some REST APIs. So I'll be needing the Spring Wave over here. So I'll do a finish, let it create a project over here. So here I get my project, Spring REST Content Negotiation. And right here, first of all, I will just do some very basic thing. Let me create a model, or let me create a DTO, a data transfer object. And I want to expose my data in form of the DTO. So I'll just create a class and I'll put it inside a package called com.example.dto. Okay. And the name of the class will be, let's say, student. Okay. So let's say I have a student class. Let me maximize it. And inside this student class, let's say I have few property. Let's say private int ID and private string name of the student and private string email. Okay. And this is a DTO. So basically it will have the getters and setters and the toString method. And obviously I need a constructor. I don't want to generate all these things by myself. Rather, I want to use Lombok here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my project and I'll do a right click. I'll click on Spring and add starters. And I'll look for Lombok here. So let me just type Lombok and there you go. Click on this, do a next and update your POM. So I got Lombok dependency here. Okay, my POM is updated. I'll do a finish and there you go. And now just to make sure I get my dependencies and everything is in place, I'll just do a Maven update project, force update and click on OK to make sure I have the Lombok here on my project dependency. Now I will be using an annotation over here called @data coming from Lombok. And now this @data annotation will help me to get the getter, setter, toString, hash code equals, and obviously the constructor. So that's good. So I have this DTO available right over here. And the good thing is that we haven't generated the getter setters by ourselves. Good. So now I want to create a very simple controller. So I'm going to click new Java class and I'll put it inside a package called com.example.demo.controllers. Okay. And here I want to keep all my controllers and I'm going to say student controller. Okay. There you go. I have my student controller over here. Let me maximize this. And first of all, this is going to be my controller. So I'm going to write a RestController annotation over here because I'll be writing some REST endpoint, which is going to expose some data to the outer world. And first of all, I'll be writing a get endpoint. Let's say I want to write a method. Let's say public string. Let's say get student, and I'm going to say version 1, v1. And I will basically return a new student object over here. And I'm going to say new student. And obviously this is not going to give me a constructor to initialize all the student data. For an example, I have the student ID, the student name, let's say Vilas, let's say the email of the student, let's say obi@gmail.com. I don't have a constructor to put in all the values. So I'll go to my student class, and here I will basically write a all R constructor. So the Lombok will generate a constructor which will initialize all these values. So a 3-parameter constructor it will generate. So now I think if I'm gonna save this, this should work fine. What happened over here? Change the method return type to student. Oh, okay. I want to return the student over here. Okay. But I want to return the student in the student object in plain text. So this is my student object. So I'm going to say dot toString. Okay. So the toString is going to return me a string over here. Okay. So this is something that I want to do. So let's say this is the method which is going to return me a string version of my student object. Okay. So the strings are represented as the text in Java. So we can represent text in form of string in Java. So there's something that I have done, and I'll be writing a get mapping over here. And let's say I'll be writing the mapping as student. Okay. So if I'm going to hit this endpoint, I'm going to be getting my student object, but in form of string. Let's just see whether that is working or not. So first of all, let me start my Spring Boot application. Do a right click, run as Spring Boot app. And this is going to bring up my Spring Boot application, whether it is running. Let me maximize this. Well, it started on port number 8080, which looks good to me. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up my Postman. Where is that? Okay, here is that guy. Let me move it to here. All right, now let's just hit our endpoint here. So obviously my application is running on http://localhost port number 8080. Then my API that I've created is /student. Obviously it's a GET request. So choose GET over here. And now I'm going to do a send. This is how blindly I'm going to do the things. And obviously I get a response back. I have sent a request. I got a response back. Okay, clear, right? So right now, let's just try to analyze this request and response cycle a little bit. So whenever we are hitting this request, okay, this request is going to the server. Now the Postman is the client here. Using this client application, which is Postman, we are consuming the data by asking the data to the server. And there goes my server. My server is over here. Okay, here is my Tomcat server where my code is deployed and it is running, right? So my server is up and running. It is running on port number 8080, and this is a embedded Tomcat server where my code is deployed, right? Now, whenever we send this request using our client application, whenever we're sending this request, with this request, there are also some other information we are sending with this request. Just like that, I told you, I am a content producer. You are a content consumer. While you are consuming the data, right? Let's say you are consuming the topics on Spring Boot. Right now, you are saying, okay, Vilas, do you have contents on REST API? Let's say I'm going to say yes. Now, you as a consumer, just like imagine you are Postman, you are saying, okay, give me those contents on Spring Boot. Okay. Doesn't matter. You have the Spring Boot contents in audio format, video format, whatever format, any format I'm okay with. As a consumer, I'm okay with it. You just give me the data. Just like that, here we are sending the request to the server. And we are asking the server that, okay, get us the data, whatever this endpoint exposes. Doesn't matter if it is exposes in terms of string, give me that. If it is exposing in terms of JSON, XML, PDF, whatever format, we don't care. Just get us the data, okay? And I told you that whenever we are sending this request, we are just saying, just give me the data. I don't care about the, content type, the type of the data the server is exposing. Now, where we are specifying this, I want to bring your attention to this console thing, okay? This will help you to understand the request and response cycle a little bit. If I'm going to click on this, you can see this is our request that we made, is the get request. If I'm going to expand this, okay, you can see there is some request header. Like whenever we hit this request, there is something went with the request, and all these things are those things that went with the request to our server, and the server uses this information to understand how it will send the data to the client, which is Postman. Okay. Now, when the server sent the data, this is the response header, and the server says there is something called content type, like the type of the data that the server has produces. And you can see it is written here, text plain. That means in plain text format, the content type which has been generated by the server said, hey, I'm sending you the data, and the content type, the format of the data is text plain. Okay. Okay. And obviously you can see that the data that we have from the server, that is visualized over here in form of text. Okay, that's the format of the data. Now the thing is that whenever we sent this request to the server, you can see with the request header, whenever we're requesting for data, there is something called accept. Okay, using this accept, okay, we haven't filled all these things whenever we hit this request. All these things has been automatically generated by this Postman. So while we hit this request, all these things has went with the request, and there is an attribute over here. There's something called accept, and there is an asterisk/asterisk. And this does mean that the client is ready to accept the data, whatever the way the server is exposing. We don't care about like the data format, whether it will be plain text or XML or JSON or PDF or blah, blah, blah. We just need the data. Whatever format the server is exposing, we are completely okay with that. I don't want to negotiate with the server that, okay, get me the data in that format only. Okay. So the accept is something. So what we are sending with the request header, whenever we are requesting to our server that, okay, I am going to accept the data in this format, but here we're not specifying anything. We're saying, okay, we're fine with anything. Okay. I think you understand that. Now, the thing is that where we have all these things, because it's a plain request that I made. If you see there is something called header, this is the request side, this is the response side, right? So if I'm going to click on this headers here, okay, you can see I don't have any headers specified, but there are 7 hidden headers. If I'm going to click on that, look at that. Okay, there is something called accept here, and all these things has been auto-generated. You can see hide auto-generated headers. If I'm going to click on that, it will be hidden. So these things are automatically generated, and accept is an attribute that we can specify while we'll make a request from the client in order to let the server know that what we will be accepting, in which format we will be accepting the data, in which format we as a client are interested to accept the data. Okay. Now by default, we haven't specified anything over here. Okay. So now let's say here, I want to override this accept here. Okay. Let's say I'm going to say accept here. Okay. Now from the client, I'm going to send the request by overriding this accept here. If I'm going to write this, whatever value that I have written, this will be overwritten. You can already see a strike mark over here, or you can remove this if you're getting confused. And I'm going to put the value over here. Let's say I want to accept the data in text in plain text. So how do you specify that? Text plain. Okay. I want to accept the data from this endpoint in plain text. I'm going to do send. Okay. I'm happily getting the data out of data from the server. And if you're going to see the console here, okay, you can see I'm not talking about this request right now. This is the new request of mine. And you can see the accept here right now changed. Previously, see how the accept was star slash star. And right now the accept in the new request is changes to text slash plain. So whenever I'm making this request, I want to accept the data in plain text. Now there is a response from the server and it says, okay, you asked for the text plain data, the plain text data, and here it goes. The data that you got over here is in plain text. Now, let's say I'm going to hit this endpoint. I'm going to say, okay, I want to accept in this, the data that I want to accept from the server, this data I want in whatever format. Let's say I want it in video format. I want it in audio format. These are all audio formats that we have. I want it in which format? Let's say PDF format. I want it in let's say JPEG format. I want it in application format. Let's say I want it in application JSON format. Okay, let's say I want to accept the data in JSON format. I want the server should give me the data right now, not in text. It should give me the data in JSON. Okay, let's just do a send. So what do you think? What will happen if I'm going to do send right now? Okay, so what do we get over here? I hit JSON over here. If I'm going to do a send, okay, it's just giving me 200 okay here. Okay, so let's just check here. In the these are the three requests that I think, okay, let's just clear out because there are so many requests that we made. Let's just clear our console. This is my request area and I want to get the data in JSON format. I want to do send. Okay, now I get a 200 okay from the server. What the server is saying that this is the data that it returned, and in which format it did return? It returned it in JSON format. It doesn't look like JSON, isn't it? But let's just analyze a request over here. In the request header, we specified that we want to accept in JSON format the data. In the response header, the content type is said that is JSON. Okay, so it's just saying that, okay, I'm going to give you the data in JSON format, and looks like this is just a JSON string here. And obviously here we are returning a string over here. So maybe it is just giving us a JSON string over here. And this doesn't look like JSON. This is not the object representation for JSON. Maybe the Spring Boot has some by default support for JSON. So is somewhat converted this string to JSON, the student object to JSON, and given it back to us. Okay, what about, okay, I want to, right now, let's not talk about JSON because maybe Spring Boot has some by default support for JSON. Okay, what about, let's just try some other format. Let's just try some XML format. Let's say I want to get the data in form of XML. Let's just do a send. Okay, this is just saying 200 okay over here. Okay, now let's just analyze this. Okay, and we are asking the data in XML format. It is giving us the data. It is returning the data in XML format. Okay, but this doesn't look like XML. The thing is that. So maybe this is a string. So we are getting rid of all these things. So let's not waste our time on this right now. Let's just do return an object, because I think in whatever format we are asking the data, the server is giving us the data in that format. And this is the example of that. We are asking the data in XML, the content type, it is returning the data with is also XML. But into our naked eyes, this is a string. So we are not getting the flavor of JSON or XML and those stuff. Let's just try to do one thing over here. Okay, over here, let's just do one thing. I want to do one thing. Here I am returning in plain text. Okay, so I want to define some different endpoints over here. Let's say this is my student endpoint. And this is my student endpoint again. And let's say this student endpoint here, I'm going to say student v2 or version 2. But here, I don't want to return string. I want to return a student object itself. I want to return a student DTO object itself. And I don't want to write toString over here. I'll remove that. Okay. Let's just try to save this. And let's just see whether our server is going to start fine if I'm going to rephrase and restart my application. Let me restart this. Okay, we have a problem here, right? So here I have an endpoint called /student, which is basically returning the data in the plain string format. And here is the same endpoint again, /student is the same mapping, get mapping again. It is returning you the data in form of student object here. Now what is wrong over here? If you're going to see over here, okay, it is saying error creating the bean here for request mapping handler mapping, and it is saying ambiguous mapping over here. Okay, it is saying that we have an ambiguous mapping. We have two methods here. Over here we have two methods, but the same mapping /student, and that is not possible. But our intention is not to create two endpoints over here. My intention here, this whenever we are hitting this this method, this endpoint, I want to return plain string. Okay, so this method here producing the string over here, the object representation of the string. So the way I can specify here, I can write value here to define my endpoint. Then I can just keep a comma and I can write produces. What I am producing? I am producing the plain text. Okay, text/plain. I am producing text/plain text. Okay, so this is something that I'm producing. And over here, I'm returning a new student object. I'm returning the student object directly. But whenever somebody is hitting this endpoint, by mentioning that they want data, the student object itself in JSON format, I want to execute this method. So in that case, I'm going to write the value over here one more time. And I'm going to say, if somebody is going to ask the data in form of JSON, then this is the method which can produce the data in JSON. So I'm going to say produces, I'm going to say application/JSON. Okay, this is how the client need to ask us the data for JSON. If it wants our student object to be represented as JSON whenever we are sending back the data to them, they need to ask us the data in this way. And that's what I'm specifying over here called produces. Okay, so let's say I'm going to give some log over here. I'm going to say sout or sysout, plain text method executed. Okay, and I'll copy that. And I'm going to say here, I'm going to say JSON method executed, because this method is going to produce the JSON data. And this is how I've specified this. Now let's just test this out. Okay, let me stop my application and restart it again because I have done some changes. Otherwise, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to go to my project. I'm going to do a right click, Spring, add starters, and I'm going to add a new starter. Let's say for the automatic rephrasing and reloading, I'm going to be adding the dev tools here, Spring Boot dev tools. Next, and I'm going to update my POM, and I'm going to do a finish. And to make sure that I get the dev tool over here, I'm going to just do Maven and update project to make sure that I have everything in place. Right now, let me just restart my application, and next time I'm going to do some code changes. I'm sure it will be automatically refreshed and will be deployed to my server. So I don't have to do stop and start every time, because I just have added the dev tool support to my application right over here. I hope this makes sense. So let me close this. And right now, let's just go to our client. Let me clear everything. Okay. Now I want to hit this endpoint. It's the get endpoint. I want the data in plain text. So I'm gonna say text/plain. Okay. Now if I'm gonna hit this, now what is going to happen? And look at that. We have two methods here, but this method has attached with the same endpoint, but this produces the text plain. Now this method will be executed and will serve the data to the client. I'm going to do send here, and look at that. I get the data in text format. We're going to analyze this. The accept header over here, whenever it is requesting for data, is text plain. The response header from the server is text plain. And I'm pretty sure if you're going to look at the console here, this method got executed, and this is the line that you can see on the console, plain text method executed. Hope that makes sense. Now, if I want the data in JSON format, so let's just do that. I'm going to say application/JSON. Now client is doing a send, and there you go. Look at the data that the server is giving. Now the server has given the data in JSON format, and the JSON data that I got over here, right? Now this looks like the JSON representation of our student object, right? And I'm pretty sure now this method got executed, because this method is producing the JSON over here, and you can see the JSON method got executed. That means this method right now got called, right? And now the client is hitting the same endpoint, but it is negotiating with the server in which way it wants the data. It wants the data in JSON format, it wants the data in XML format, or it wants the data in plain text. Well, let's just check. If the client wants the data in XML format, now what do you think what will happen right now? Okay, this is a good scenario. Now see, hit this endpoint right now. First of all, let me clear my console. If I'm gonna do a send here, now there you go. You have an exception, 406 not acceptable. Now you as a client is hitting this endpoint, is hitting this request. You are asking the data to the server, but you are saying that I as a client, I'm only going to accept the data in XML format. Okay, understand this. Now the server is giving you the response, but it is saying, okay, hold on, not acceptable. I'm not going to accept this request because I cannot form the data in XML format. So the 406 acceptable is a client error. You know about different series of errors, right? 501, 502, 503 is all server errors. 500 series error. 401, 402, the very famous 404, 403, like that we have 406. The 406 is a client error. That means the client, who is the client? The Postman is the client. When Postman is hitting, when the Postman is being a client, is making a request, we are making the request using the Postman, which is a client. Now the client is making a mistake while hitting this request. And that's why it is getting the error called 406 not acceptable. That means you are putting some wrong value in the accept. If the server cannot give you that data, then you will get not acceptable error. Now 406 not acceptable the client is getting because it is asking the data in a wrong format. If you're going to see the endpoints that we have created right now, every endpoint that we have created, if you're going to look at this, it is very clearly mentioned. This endpoint student, which is attached to this method, can only produces the data in plain text. Now, the method that we have over here, which is attached to the same endpoint, it is mentioned clearly. It can only produce the data in this format, in JSON format. Previously, we had a method which does not have this produces thing over there. You remember the first use case that we have tested? We used to hit anything like I want the data in XML, I want the data in JSON, I want the data in plain text, and the server used to serve us the data in that format. But right now, now we are getting a problem called not acceptable, because we are very clearly mentioning the produces over here, what our method can produce. And we do not have any endpoint called /student which can produce the XML format of the data. And that's why we're getting the not acceptable error, right? But if the server can have one more endpoint, let's say Control C, Control V. Let's say I want to expose the value, which will be the student object, but in application XML format. Okay. Now my server has a support for XML. And obviously we have written a new method. Our dev tool is in action and looks like the reloading has happened over here and it has redeployed our code. So which is good. Let's just test the same endpoint right now over here. Now we should not get a 406 not acceptable because the server has an endpoint for that. Now if I'm going to do send right now here the accept is XML. I'm going to clean everything on my console. If I'm going to do send, now look at that. Is 500 internal server error. Now we have a problem, right? Obviously we have an error here. 500 internal server error is an issue. But this is not an issue from the client end. The client is who is the client here? The Postman is the client. The Postman is hitting the request. And the Postman is hitting the request. It is giving the accept header. If you're going to look at this, okay, this is the request and response cycle. Now it is accepting the data in XML. So the Postman is asking the data. It says, I'm going to accept the data in XML. And now the response says that it has a problem. It has a 500 internal server error. This is the response status. This means that there is something wrong in the server side. The server is not able to, get the data, get the student data in XML format. The format that we are asking, the server is not able to process our request. So it is having some issue. Okay. That is the developer problem. Let's say I am the consumer. I am testing the endpoints that you guys have written. For an example, this is the endpoint that you have written, and you said that, okay, the application that I have written, it can generate the data in XML format. And that's what I as a client is doing. What is my fault? It is not my fault. That's why I'm not getting any 406 error. It is a 500 error. This is a server side error. You have written the code and deployed it into the server. So it is the issue that need to be fixed by you, right? So now let's just see why we have this error right now. Why the server has an error. Let's just go to the server side. Let's just check our console. Let's just see whether we have any exception. And look at that. We have a warning. And here we have an exception handler, exception resolver, exception handler, exception resolver. And it is saying HTTP MediaType not acceptable exception, no acceptable representation. It is saying the request that we are making, it is not able to represent the resource in that format. That's why it is giving HTTP MediaType not acceptable exception. So what do you mean by MediaType? So all these things that I have mentioned over here in the produce thing, these are all MediaType. For an example, this text plain, you can replace it to MediaType. This is the MediaType. They have an enum over here. This is an enum or something. MediaType from here, or the Spring Framework or HTTP. I think they have some fields over here, maybe static final fields. And if you're gonna look for plain text, text plain value, you can choose this. Okay, instead of writing that manually, you can use the field defined by the Spring developer. If you're gonna click on this, so it will take you to the MediaType class. Okay, the class name is MediaType, and you can see they have a constant defined over here called text plain value, and this is the value for this variable. So instead of writing this manually, they have already created some variables. You can just refer to this static variable, and the static variables can be directly referred as the class name. So here you go. This is your class name called MediaType. So you can just do MediaType dot that variable name. Okay. So the text plain value is basically going to give you text plain. Okay. Just like that, you don't have to type this JSON thing. Okay. So you can define MediaType dot, let's say, can I just write application dot application JSON, sorry, application, one second, application underscore JSON value. If you're gonna hover on this, you can see the value is application JSON. This is exactly something that I want. Okay, and for XML, application/XML, you can also replace this with the best practice called MediaType. This is the class. They have a field defined called application XML value. And if you're gonna hover on this, you can see this is the value. This is the string they have already defined inside this static variable. So you can just refer to this, okay? But anyhow, this is not working. This is just, I just refactored the code, but whenever you're gonna be hitting this won't work, okay? You are getting a 500 internal server error. Now, what is the problem? Now, the thing is that you are saying whenever you're gonna hit this endpoint, I'm gonna give you the value in XML format, in this format, application/XML. I'm going to give you the data in this format, but somehow the Spring Boot is not able to convert this Java object into XML, right? So how can we force Spring Boot right now to convert this Java object into XML? Well, you don't have to do a lot of coding over here. So what you can simply do, you can go to internet. So you can go to Google Chrome, and here you can search for Maven repo. And inside the Maven repository, you can search for something called Jackson data. You can search for faster XML. Okay, and faster XML is a API, Jackson data format XML. You just need to get this. You can click on this. You just need to get the thing from here. com.fasterxml. This is the group ID, and the artifact is Jackson data format XML. You just need to copy this, go back to your STS, and open up your pom.xml, and you can put it over here inside the dependency. You can just put it over here, and you can remove the version because this is a Spring Boot project. The startup parent will manage the version, okay? We have defined the version over here for the parent, and internally it is managing the version for the XML support that we have provided for our application. Now I can stop my application because this is a new dependency that I have added. I can update my project to make sure everything is downloaded and I have them inside the class path. Then I can start the project right now. Okay, now my application has an XML support, right? So I think we don't have any error. Let's just go to our Postman right now. Now I want to accept the data in XML format. So let's just do send here. There you go. I got the data in XML. So the Spring Boot has converted my student object to this format right now, which is XML. Let's say I'm hitting the same endpoint, but I want to get the data in, let's say, JSON format. So JSON, okay, send, I'm getting the data in JSON format. Let's say I want to get the data in text plain. So I'm gonna get the data in plain text over here, okay? I'll just do a send, I'm getting the data in plain text over here. Okay, so now here is a question for you, right? For application XML, if I want to give my Spring Boot application a support for XML like this. If I want to use this media type, if my endpoint will produce the XML type of data, which will be the Java object representation for XML, then I have given a support to my application, right? I've added this faster XML dependency, and rest of the things obviously has been taken care, like the conversion and the converter part has been taken care by the Spring Boot application itself. Maybe some auto configuration is kicking in, and maybe things has been done internally. Like that, I have mentioned about this thing in my other Spring Boot courses, but I have a question for you. Whenever I have defined this endpoint and I said I want to give the JSON support, I haven't added any JSON support to my Spring Boot application. Then how it is working? Isn't it? That's a valid question. How it is even working? Do you have an answer for this? This is an interview question, and I'm sure everybody need to hour about this. So this is how it is working. So if I'm gonna go to my pom.xml, and if I'm gonna click on this dependency hierarchy, so these are all these jars that we have in our application. But for my Spring Boot starter web, this is my web support for my Spring Boot application. You can see whenever we're adding the Spring Boot starter web to our application into our pom.xml, it is already getting the Spring Boot starter JSON over here. Okay, so the Spring Boot starter JSON is part of this dependency, and whenever we are adding this dependency, if I'll go to pom.xml, whenever we are adding this dependency, internally it is fetching the transitive dependencies. And if I'm going to go to the dependency hierarchy, you can see the Spring Boot starter web. If I'm going to collapse this, also has something called Spring Boot starter JSON inside it, and the Spring Boot starter JSON is another Spring Boot starter file or dependency, which basically has all these different things. Let's say the Jackson data bind. The Jackson data bind is basically the important one, and you can see all these things over here: the Jackson annotation, Jackson core, Jackson data bind, data format. All this Jackson support has been added to my Spring Boot automatically through this starter wave, right? So if you don't believe me, go to pom.xml and go over here to your Spring Boot starter wave. Let's say I want to exclude the JSON support. Okay, so what I'll do, I can write this exclusion tag. Okay, let's say from my dependency, let's say if I'll be excluding the JSON support for my Spring Boot application, then I told you if I'll go to my pom.xml, if I'll go to the dependency hierarchy, this is the guy, Spring Boot starter JSON, which is basically bringing in all this Jackson data bind, the Jackson data type, and all this other stuff, which is basically giving the JSON support to my Spring Boot application. So if I'll go to this jar by double clicking this, and if I'll copy the group ID and artifact ID, if I'll close this, if I'll go to my pom.xml by clicking on the pom.xml, for my Spring Boot starter web, if I'm going to exclude this group ID and artifact ID, if I'm going to put it over here, okay, and do a Control S, okay, obviously exclusions, then I have to write another tag, exclusion. After exclusions, you have to write exclusion, and here you have to specify whatever you want to exclude. Let's say I want to exclude this artifact, okay, the Spring Boot starter JSON. And if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to do Control S, you will see if I'm going to stop this first, and if I'm going to refresh, update project, do OK. And now if I'm going to go to my dependency hierarchy, if I'm going to collapse this starter web, if I'm going to expand, let's see this. Where is that Jackson support right now? It is not there, right? So by default, that has been added and bought by this dependency. Now we have removed it. Now, if I'm going to go to my student controller, Obviously, I think right now you're going to have an issue whenever you're going to be hitting this. So let's just check that. Okay. So let's say my client right now is asking the data in plain text. It is getting it. It is asking the data in application XML format. I'm going to do send. It is getting the data in XML format whenever I'm writing the accept type. Let's say I want the data in application JSON. I'm going to do send. Oh, we are getting the data in JSON format. It's giving me 200. Okay, this is crazy. What I'm expecting that I suppose not to get the data over here in JSON format because I have removed the JSON support from my Spring Boot application. But how it is even working, let's just check on that. So everything is good here in the pom.xml. Do we have the Jackson? Oh, well, we have the Jackson support here. Okay. So can we go to our dependency? Now this is our Spring Boot wave, starter wave. Now I've written exclusion and Spring Boot starter JSON. I've already excluded this. It looks like this exclusion didn't work. Okay. Let's just do one thing otherwise. Okay. Let's just go to our pom.xml. Let's just go to the dependency hierarchy. I think this Jackson data format XML that we have specified here, this is bringing in the Jackson data bind again and the Jackson annotation and the Jackson core again. Maybe that is the reason why the JSON support is still there. So can I try this? pom.xml. Let me remove the XML support also. Okay. So for now, let me comment this out. So now I'm removing the XML support. All right. Let me do a Maven update. This is interesting. All right. Now let me run this as a Spring Boot application. Okay. So now I have excluded the Jackson support from here, from our Spring Boot starter wave. And I don't also have support for the XML. Okay. Now, if I will go to my client and look for the JSON, let's look at this. There we go. Now it gives you an internal server error. Okay. So we don't have any JSON support for our application. So, which is good. But if you're going to look for plain text, it should serve you the data. But if you're going to look for XML, we have removed the XML support. So again, it's going to be an internal server error because we have the endpoint present here, but it doesn't know how to give the support to that because we have commented out this thing. And over here, we already have an endpoint available for the XML, but it is not able to convert this Java object to XML because we have removed the support. Now, as we have commented out this thing, okay, from the Spring Boot starter wave, the Spring Boot starter JSON, we have also taken out the JSON support here also. So what I want to prove over here, the JSON support has given by the Spring Boot to you. So if you want to, if you're writing a Spring MVC application where you have to convert a Java object to JSON, that won't happen automatically. You have to add the Jackson data bind API to the pom.xml. You have to add the Jackson data bind, Jackson core, and Jackson annotation to your pom.xml in order to convert a Java object to JSON format, right? But if I'm going to remove this exclusion, okay, in Spring Boot, there is no work need to be done by the developer. Things will work fine. If I'm going to remove this exclusion, now I should get back. If I'm going to go to the dependency hierarchy, over here, you can see the Spring Boot starter JSON is back right now. I'm going to remove this. Okay, collapse everything. Starter wave, the starter JSON is back. Okay, so that's the thing. So now if I'm going to go over here, and if I'm going to do a send for XML, it is not working because obviously we don't have the support. For JSON, it should work. Oh, it is not working because I have not refreshed my pom.xml. Okay, just do it. It should work fine. Update project, first update. Okay, then start your application. Whenever you are making a dependency change, make sure to stop the application, refresh your project, and then you hit the endpoint and you should get the data over here. Okay, so the Spring Boot has the automatic support for JSON format. You don't have to do anything. Things will happen automatically. Okay, one more thing. Let's say if I'm not going to accept for if I'm not going to put this accept over here, if I'm gonna accept, I'm okay to accept anything. Okay, so I'm hitting this endpoint. I just need data. I don't care like in which format you are sending me the data. Then what will happen? If I'm gonna do send, okay, see, always it is going to give you the data in JSON format. So if you're gonna go to the last endpoint that we did hit, see, we asked for, we are okay to get any kind of data, any kind of format. And by default, the content type is JSON. So if you have many endpoints, if I'm going to go to the student controller, if I have many endpoints, always the one which is JSON, that will be invoked again and again. And you'll see this println on your console for multiple times, the JSON method executed. Hope that makes sense. Okay, now one more thing that we can also club these methods together. For an example, I want to bring back my XML support. So I'll go to my pom.xml and I want to uncomment this because I want my application to have the XML support. Okay. And now I will go to the student controller once. Let me stop my application. Let's say I'm going to comment this method. I'm going to comment this method. I want to have one method which is attached to this endpoint. Okay, let me remove this method log that we have printed over here. Let's say I just look at this method. Don't look at the other methods that we have. Just look at this method. Okay, let's say there is a method which has an endpoint. Now it only produces the JSON value. Let's say I'm going to say this can produce multiple values right now. It can produce the JSON value. It also can produce the MediaType XML value. Let's say XML, the application XML value. There you go. Okay. And also it can support MediaType dot plain text. Okay. Text plain. Okay. Now I have only one method right now, which has attached to this endpoint, but it can, which is basically returning a student object. But right now, this method can produce this value in this format. It can produce value in JSON format, an application JSON format. It can produce value in XML format. It can produce value in plain text format as well. Okay, so text plain, you can see, is the value. Then do you think this one method can produce all this thing? Will it work? Let's just check. If I'm going to do right click, Maven, update project one more time, because I'm doing a lot of commenting, uncommenting, just to make sure that you guys are in sync with me. Let me know if you're in sync. Let me know that in the comment. So if I'm going to run this Spring Boot application, let's just see what is going to happen. Okay. So if I will go over here and let's say I'm not putting any accept type right now. It is, let me just remove the console. I think you understand the console thing over here. And also let me remove this thing. I'm just putting the endpoint as a get endpoint. I'm okay to accept the data in any format. So by default, I think the JSON will come. But let's say, no, I want to get the data in XML format. Let's just do a send. There you go. I'm getting the data in XML format. There you go. So you look at the code. You have just one method. It has support for everything, the JSON, the XML, and then the plain text, right? So one method is serving us, the thing. Now, if I'm going to do send, I'm getting the data in XML. If I'm writing JSON, I'm going to get the data in JSON, right? But what about if I want to get the data in plain text? So I'm going to say text plain. Now what is going to happen? So do you think if I'm going to come to this method, Spring Boot is going to convert this object to plain text by invoking the toString method of the student? Here, obviously, we have the toString method available because we have @data. So, and it will send us the data in plain text format. Let's just see whether that is going to happen. If I'm going to do send, here the accept type is text plain. Okay, I'm getting an internal server error. And why is the error coming? Look at that. It is again going to say you the same exception. The MediaType not acceptable thing. No acceptable representation. That means the controller here, this method is not able to convert this object into toString. So in producers, you can define the JSON value and XML together, I feel, but I think the plain text you cannot define inside the same place. So what I will do, I'll remove this. Okay, I have one method which has the support for both XML and JSON. And I can safely remove this method, which basically produces the XML value. So I can remove that. And I can remove all these empty spaces. And I can have one more method here. Okay, I can uncomment this. And this method duty is it is going to produce the data in plain text. And here I'm going to manually invoke the toString method on top of the object. Let's see whether this works. And obviously this will work. So I think you can club the application JSON and XML together with the text plain. I think you have to write another method. So let's just see whether that works. So I'm writing text plain right now. I'm getting the data in plain text. You can see the data representation. I want the data in JSON, and I should get the data in JSON. If you want the data in XML, you can just get the data in XML. And if you want the data in HTML format, like that, you can just look for HTML. But right now, I think we don't have any support for the HTML. So it will give us the problem. Let's say we can also ask the data in, let's say, Word format or PDF format. Let's say I'm going to say application PDF. This will fail because we don't have a support for that. And you can see it is just saying 4 or 6 not acceptable because we don't have any endpoint which will give you the PDF thing. But if you want to give that, you can simply do it. You can just copy this endpoint, create one more, and as I have said, like just change the producers. I want to put one value, so no need to define the array. And here you can define MediaType dot PDF application/PDF. Choose this, and let's say get student v3 is the method name. And you have to do some tweak here in terms of the return type because here we'll be returning a PDF. So let's just go to our pages and let's just create a PDF, open a blank page, and I will save this. So I'll click on File, Export, move to Export to PDF, and I will basically save it as a PDF. And I'm going to say my student.pdf, and this is the PDF file that we have. Okay, so I'm going to do what? I'm going to copy this PDF file. I'll go to my Spring Boot application. Imagine I have a service which is generating the PDF and putting it inside my project. Imagine my service has created this PDF and did put it over here. Now, if I want to expose this PDF, then I have already specified the PDF format, but the return type I have to change over here. this one I need to change it to input stream resource. Okay. And here I will have some line break. I will expand this. Okay. And here I will define an object for input stream resource, RET equal to null. And I will return this RET over here. Okay, so let's just initialize our input stream resource right now. So I'm going to say RET is equal to new input stream resource. Let's say it takes an input stream resource in the parameter. So maybe I'm going to create a file input stream. File input stream is equal to new file input stream, just to create a stream where I can define my path for the file, and I can give this file input stream over here. And here I can define my path, and obviously my PDF file is present inside my class path, and this is my student.pdf. Copy that path wherever your PDF file exists and create a file input stream and give that to the input stream resource constructor over here. Now maybe this is throwing some exception. Let me just add it to the try and catch, or you can even throw this over here, not a problem. Okay, so there you go. So I think this is ready. So do we have any exception? I think not. So now let's just go to our Postman, and right now I want to accept PDF by hitting the same endpoint, do a send, and there you go. This is the PDF format right now. That is my server is exposing. Now I want the data in JSON. So I want JSON. There you go. This is the JSON data. I think you understand the content negotiation means we as a client is negotiating with the server. Let me know if that helps. Hello and welcome back. So I have just taken a small break. It's not a small break. I actually went to sleep. Yesterday I was just recording during my evening. So it's a beautiful Sunday here, and we're all set. We're all fresh, having my morning tea. And it's not morning actually. It's already 11:16. So actually yesterday I didn't feel like recording. So it's a fresh start again. So let's just get started one more time, huh? And this time we're going to be doing a very interesting thing. So yesterday we understood a lot about the consuming part. Yesterday we learned like we can hit a GET request, okay? And we can do a send. So we're actually grabbing the data from the server. So Postman, being a client, is grabbing the data from the server. Well, why Postman is grabbing this data? Why Postman is hitting this endpoint? Because I'm just testing. Okay, this is just a testing tool, right? In real time, this is how you'll be testing for sure. You'll be using Postman or SOAP UI or some advanced tool for the API testing. But end of the day, there will be another application which will hit this endpoint or fire this endpoint and will grab the data and will do something with the data. Maybe it will show it to the UI. Maybe it will process this data and do something else. So that's another thing. But right now the Postman is a client which is basically consuming the data, because the GET is just for getting the data and we're getting it. Okay, and we understand that from our headers, we can have an accept type and we can accept the data in any format, right? Like application JSON, right? And this is how we are basically telling the server, hey, we want the data in this format. But this is all about, we want to get the data in this format. So we are basically consuming the thing. And you might have a question that, okay, Vilas, so how can I know if I'm going to hit this endpoint? What are the different types of format the server support to produce the data with, right? Let's say I'm hitting this endpoint, I'm using application JSON, I'm getting the JSON data. If I'm using XML, I'm getting the XML data. So how can I know like what are the different types of format that the server will produce? So for an example, by default in my code, let's say I'm writing a consumer application and I'll code like this, application JavaScript. Okay, if I'll do send, obviously it will fail. It will say 406 not acceptable because the server doesn't have code to generate the student data in JavaScript format. So you as a client, you won't be worrying about it because whoever will be writing this APIs, okay, they will create a kind of documentation, and those documentation mostly they will use something like a Swagger tool for the REST API documentation, and will give you a proper documentation like this is the API, this is the get method, this is the different types of format it can produce. It can produce the plain text, it can produce the JSON, it can produce the XML, and it can also produce the value in PDF. So this endpoint support this for produces value. So whenever you are hitting the server sends the data in this format, and that's what we call content type, right? So you already understand that. Over here, from the client perspective, it want to accept the data in this format. So when we hit this request, you can see on the console, for an example, this is the endpoint, this is my request header. We want to accept the data in JavaScript format. Now the server is basically sending a response. In the response header, you can see the accept type is only these 4. Okay, this is what coming from the response from the server, and we are basically giving JavaScript here in the accept in the request. That's why this is not a valid it's not a valid request. But if you're going to change it to JSON, if you're going to do send, okay, now you can see if I'm going to go to this request, okay, now you can see we ask the data in JSON format, and in the response is a valid response, by the way, and you can see it's that 200 is the the status code. And obviously the content type here is application JSON. The content type is of server perspective. The type of content that it is sending whenever basically we are requesting for data, it is also sending the content type. And this is what the content type that it sent. This data that you got in the response, the content type is JSON, right? So now in my client perspective, from my Postman perspective, I'm all consuming the data right now. So let's just talk about, okay, what about the client need to, send the data. The client want to send some content with the request. And think about the scenario. Right now, the client is making a GET request. It's all about getting the data. Now, let's say if the client want to post something. Now, let me create another tab here, and let me copy the same URL. And let me put it over here. And let's say the client want to post the data. Okay, it want to create or post the data on the server. Now, if I'm going to post a student over here, then I have to send the student data that I want to create on the server through the body. Okay, so with the request, this is my request URL. This is the type of method. This is my request header. And now, with my request header, I will send some data with my request body. So this is the request I'm preparing. I'm clicking on the body. I'm clicking on raw, and I'm gonna click on the type of the content type that I'll be sending with my request. I want to send the student data that I want to create on the server in JSON format, or in XML format, or in HTML format. Let's say I want to send the data in JSON format. Let's say I want to create a student. Let's say the student ID is 1, and then the name of the student is let's say Abhilash. Let's say Abhilash is there. Let's say Abhipsa, and let's say the email for the student is abhip@gmail.com. Let's say this is the data that I want to send, and this is a valid JSON. Why it is giving me the problem? Oh, I haven't started the parenthesis. Okay, you have to just create a valid JSON right here. Okay, the ID is 1 without the double quote because this is an integer. Okay, now this is the body that I have prepared, and in my request body I'm sending the JSON data. And what type of content I'm sending? The content type is what? JSON. This is something that I will send with my request to the server. Now if you can see, when I'm making a post request, the header, basically I have 9 headers over here. But previously, if you remember, we used to have 7 headers. Except if we'll override, there will be one more. Otherwise, it will be around 8 headers. There are 8 attributes over here, except is something that we are more concerned with. But our new request that we are creating, which is a post request, unlike the get one, where we'll be posting the data to the server, we'll be sending the data, and the data we're sending on the body, but the type of the data that we're sending is JSON. So if you're going to go to the headers one more time, here, you will find a new header. You can see there are 9 headers over here. One is extra. That is what we call the content type. And obviously, this is JSON data. Okay, we are sending the content in the body in form of JSON. And we have a new header here called content type. The server, whenever we'll be sending the data to the server will check this header called content type in order to understand what type of content the client is sending in which format, okay, by looking into this header, and then it will analyze and assess the data that you are sending. Now this is the request that I want to hit. If I'm going to hit this request, what will happen? Okay, and obviously it won't work. There is a 405 error. 405 basically means method not allowed. That means we don't have a method on the server which basically can handle a post request for /student. We need to create one, right? So basically, let me come over here. We'll create a method called PostMapping, and I want to create a method for this URL student. Now the student will be a post endpoint, which will match this post and student. And then let's say I will attach it to a method. Let's say my method name is void create student. Okay. And obviously I want to create a student. The post, whenever it will be executed, it will be creating some data to the server. And let's say this is something that I do have. Okay. Now let me have a log here inside create student post method. Okay, let's just check whether this endpoint is executing or not. Now let me hit this send. Well, it worked. Okay, the status is 200. Okay, that means the request went through successfully. And if I'm going to come over here, inside the post method has been executed. That means this method is in action right now. Okay, so now whenever I'm sending this request, okay, with this request, I'm also sending this data. Okay, with my request body, I'm sending this data to the server. Now, the server is not accepting those data yet. Okay, the server is not accepting the data. Okay, the server might be accepting, but we are not catching those data. Where we are catching this data? Let's say I'm just saying to Abhipsa and this, then this method will be executed. How we can grab this data that the client is sending? Okay, the server is not consuming those data that the client is sending. So we need to consume the data, isn't it? So the client can send the data in any format. This is the, let's say, JSON format. The client can also send the data in XML format. For an example, to write student and student, this is my class name. Let's say it will have different attribute. Let's say ID is 2 and ID, then name, let's say Abhipsa, and I will end the name tag and let's say email, and I'm going to say a beep @gmail.com, and let's say I'm going to write email, and I want to send the data in JSON, let's say XML format. Okay. Now, if you're going to go to the headers, the content type is changed to XML because I have put the XML thing over here. So whatever things you'll be putting, the headers, the content type is automatically setting to that. So the content type here is the type of the data that we are sending through the client. Okay. Let's see if we are sending the XML data. Do we send? We're getting a 200 OK. That means our server is able to process this request, okay, and able to grab the data. It has the capacity to grab the data over here, okay. But I want to be very specific right now, okay. I will just say value, and I only want to consume here. I want to consume, okay, what kind of data? Let's say I only want to consume the XML type of data. So I'm going to say MediaType dot application XML value. I only want to consume the application / XML kind of data. Okay. Now let's just see what is going to happen. Let's just do Control S. Let my server reload the changes. And here I'm hitting this endpoint. It's a post request, and I'm sending what kind of data? XML kind of data. So this method that we are creating for /student, whether it will be able to consume the XML data? Yes, it will consume only the XML data because I have a constraint right now that consumes. I will only be able to consume this type of data. So now if I'm going to do a send, okay, this gives me a 200 OK. That means the request goes accepted by the server sends a response back. And obviously we are not sending anything right now. It's a void method. So we are not returning anything. That's why there is nothing on the server response side. Let's say if I want to send the JSON data right now, put it over here. I want to send the JSON data. Okay. So in the headers right now, the content type is JSON. JSON is something that I'm sending. Okay. Let's just do a send. And boom, we have a problem right now. Unsupported media type 4015. That means the client is making some issue. The client is making some error. It's a client error. And it's an unsupported media type, right? And why? Because the RequestBody, the content type over here is JSON. But we don't consume JSON over here. We consume only XML. Okay. So we have restricted the client right now that, okay, whenever you're going to be sending the data, you need to send the data in this format. We accept PhonePe only. We accept cash only. We have restricted that. We have restricted it to XML right now. Okay. Now let's say, okay, I will be able to consume two types of data, XML and also MediaType dot application JSON. Okay. Now I'll be able to consume the XML type of data and also the JSON type of data. Now let's just try to hit this endpoint. Okay. Send. This goes through 200 OK. Buddy is the JSON type. Put the XML type of data here. Okay. I'll change this buddy to XML to make sure the content type here XML. And let's just do send. And this goes through. The status is 200 OK. Now, this is how we have specified the consumes part over here for our application, for our server. Now, it is able to consume the data. This type of data will be able to consume, but we are not actually consuming the data. Okay, in order to consume, okay, we need to use one more attribute. So this is the data that our client is sending. Now we need to have a hold to this. Okay, this is what type of data? This is student type of data. So do we have a model? Do we have a model over here in our application? Yes, we have a student DTO here. If I can expand this, and if you're gonna see this, it has ID, name, email, which is exactly matching to this attribute, ID, name, email. So our Jackson API that we have in our pom.xml file that has the ability to extract the value from this ID and bind it to this, to extract the value from the name and bind it to this name attribute, and to extract the value from the email and bind it to this email. But it has only one thing you have to obey, that is the attribute name that you have over here that we have specified. They should exactly match to the properties name of your DTO class that you have created. Right now, this is student and this is also student, and these are all the values and the attributes that we have, which is exactly matching with our properties. So what we can do, we can go to the controller, and this is a post request. This is where we are accepting the request and proceeding further. And I'm going to say over here, okay, if the client is sending anything with the request body, I just want to grab it. So in the method parameter, I will just write student and student over here. So now Spring Boot will create the student object, the Java student object, and will grab the data from this request body that you are sending. Okay, grab all this data and will set it to the ID, the name, and the email. Okay, so the object will be created internally because you are putting it inside the parameter, and also the values will be set to this object, right? And now this won't happen automatically. You also need to write an annotation over here that is called RequestBody. And obviously, whatever, this is what your RequestBody means, right? So whatever thing that you are sending in the body of the request, you want to capture that. So I just mentioned RequestBody, and whatever is coming, just put it over here inside this object, right? And then I can print this object. For an example, let me try to print it as out. Okay, and I'm going to say student over here. There you go. Let's just check whether I'm able to grab the data right now. So now the client is sending the XML type of data. Okay, so let me just do a send. Okay, is this saying a bad request? Why? Is there any error here? Okay, I have removed this. Is a client error again. It's a bad request. The client has some problem and I had a typo for sure. Now do a send. It's a 200. Okay, great. So I can see right now it is saying inside the create student post method, and there you go. Your student object along with the data coming with the request. So the request body does this work. It is able to bind the data with the student object by creating the student object and fetching the data, putting it inside this object, which is cool, right? So now let's just do one thing. I want to send the data in JSON format. Now this is the JSON thing. Do a send. Okay, it's a 200. Okay, let's just go over there. Well, the method executes again, and this time also it is able to bind the data over here, and you can see that on the log, right? So we are able to consume the data right now in XML format or in JSON format over here, and we are able to print it, which is cool. This is how you are telling that this is what my application will be able to consume. And once you consume the data, you can do anything. Let's say I want to save it. And you can just do dv.save, and you can just take the data and take this object, and you can put it over here. You can use JDBC, Hibernate, Data JPA, a Mongo client, wherever you want to save it. Just write the logic and save it. We'll be going into that later, but this is how our server is able to consume the data, right? That's it. Now, one last thing before we wrap up. Okay, this is all about the consumes part. Okay, but most of the time it's a good thing after, let's say it's a post request. The post request will create a resource on the server. So it will take the student and it will create the student data. It will insert that student data to the database. But after the insertion is successful, we also need to return something to the client that, okay, this is the student data that you have given. We have successfully inserted it, and then here goes the data that we have inserted to the server. So how can we do that? Have a look into this. For an example, let's say the createStudent method want to return the student object to the client. Okay, once the insertion is done, imagine some kind of insertion is happening over here. Once that is done, I want to return the student object to the client. So I will return, right now I'll have a return statement and I'll return a student object to the client. Obviously right now, imagine I'm returning the same student object that is coming with my request. I'm returning that object only over here, but in real time, we might need to insert some more data or more properties to the student object. After saving it to the database, then we will send this object. But imagine this is just for sample or simplicity, because here anyhow we are creating the student object. So whenever we are just declaring the student reference, the object creation will automatically happen by the Spring whenever you put it on inside the parameter, and this will create a student object. And obviously this student object has been binded with all the value coming with the request. So I have a fully fledged student object created, just being a little lazy over here and returning the same student object over here to the server. Okay, now let's just see what is going to happen. Right now my server is consuming this type of data and sending the student object. Okay, now whenever we return something, as I said, by default Spring Boot will try to return the object in JSON format. That is obvious, right? So let's just see whether I'm going to get that. Let's say I'm making a post request, I'm giving this data. So in my headers, the content type is JSON, because in the body, I'm giving the JSON data. Let's just do a send. Whenever I'll do send, the server will give me the response back. The server will give me the student object back. But this student object, I want to grab it. I want to accept it in which format? In JSON format? In XML format? Or in which format? In the header section here, I said accept whatever type is available. Whatever the server want to give me, get me the data in that type. Okay, let's just go to the body right now. Click on send. Okay, I got 200 okay here, but where is my data? I get nothing over here. So let's just go over here, create student, post method. This is something that's supposed to return. So it is not returning me that. In the response side, okay, I have nothing. Why is that? Okay, let's just check once. Let's just restart. Do okay. All right. I think everything is safe. Yeah, now it works fine. Okay, so now we get the data in JSON format. Okay, now we are sending the data in JSON format, and by default the server is returning me the data in JSON format. Okay, but let's say I will be asking the data in XML format. Then I will go to the headers, the content type, I'm sending it in JSON format, the body thing, which will be created on the server. Now in the accept type, I will override it. Okay. And I want to grab the data in XML. So I'm going to say application/XML. Okay. So now while accepting the data, I'm giving a choice that I want to accept the data in XML. Let's just do a send. There you go. Now the server is giving me the data in XML format, right? Because we already have the XML support to that. But I want to restrict it. I do not want my server to return me data in XML format. Then how can I restrict it? You know that, right? I need to add one more attribute for produces. So I'm going to write produces, and I'm going to say, hey, I only want to return data in JSON format, application JSON value. Okay, in this format only I will return application JSON. Now if you can go over here, go to the body, this is how I'm sending the data in JSON format. Is it acceptable? Yes, the server can consume the data in JSON format. That is acceptable. Okay, now is there anything wrong in this request? Let's just go to the header. Accept, how the client want to accept? It want to accept in XML format. Okay, whether the server supports producing the data in XML format. Well, the server can only produce the data in JSON format. Okay, so the client want to accept the data in XML, but that is not possible because the server is not producing the data in XML format. Now, if you're gonna do send, okay, I'm getting a 406 not acceptable client error because that is not acceptable, right? So if I'm gonna go to the accept type right now and I'm gonna change it to JSON, okay, do a send, it's working because the server can produce the data only with JSON, right? Okay, now if I'm gonna go to the body here, I don't want to send the data in JSON format. I want to send the data in XML format. Okay, now this is my request body. Now tell me whether this will work or not. Okay, so let's say, sorry, this is XML. Okay, now the XML data I have sent over here. Now the content type is changed to XML because I'm sending the data in XML format. Okay, but while getting the result from the server, I want to grab the result. Let's say, let me clear this first. Okay, I want to grab the result in JSON, whether this will be working or not. XML is the content type that I'm sending with my request. And while I'll be accepting the data from the server, I want to accept that in JSON format. Whether this will work, mention the timestamp and let me know in the comment. So whether it will work, this is your code, produces JSON. What is I'm asking? JSON. Okay, good. That is fair. What I'm sending with the body is XML, right? Content type XML. Whether XML is allowed in the consumes, the application can consume the data in XML type. Absolutely allowed. If I'm going to do send, there you go. It worked, right? So right now, if I will use an array, I'll add one more media type over here. Let's say media type, and let's say application XML value. Now the server can produce the data, which is JSON and XML. Also will be able to consume the data in XML and JSON. Now, this is the very last question. If I'll come over here, if I'll make a post request, let's say I want to accept the data in XML, okay? And I want to send the data in XML. I'm sending the data in XML format, okay? And the moment I will be hitting this response, I want to grab the data in XML format. That will be possible? Absolutely. Do a send, I grab the data in XML format. Okay, this is how I send the data. This is how the server responded me back. Okay, and this is the post mapping, and this is my produces, this is my consumes. Hope this makes sense. Okay, and this is how we can do content negotiation, and the server is not bound to send every type of data, or the server is not bound to consume every type of data. There are different data type, as I said. Here in the header, you can accept the data. You can say, okay, server, send me the data in audio format. These are all the audio format that you have. There are a lot of application type. Okay, these are all this application type. But my server is not supporting all this type of data, right? It will not produce the data in all these formats. It is very specific. Okay, this API, okay, PostMapping student will produce the data only in this two format and will consume the data only in this two format. Okay, this is what produces, consumes means in REST API, and it's very important, very, very important thing, and maybe the only thing which matters a lot when it comes to the day-to-day coding. If you like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. And let me know if you have any doubts or questions in the comments. If you have any issues, post it on my Facebook group, and do follow me on Instagram. This is my Instagram ID, and do subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to check more and more contents, just go and browse through my YouTube channel, or you can also take the advantages of my paid courses here as well from seleniumexpress.com. I don't want to promote it over here on my YouTube. You can go to my website and can check out the courses available. That's it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, bye-bye. Take care. Happy coding and love you guys.